But really excited to dive into this topic here on how to audit your paid media vendors. So I'm Jason Lynch. I'm the head of marketing here at Netsertive. We have Zach Swann, our senior program manager at Netsertive, and definitely a key strategist on our team that knows more about paid media than I would ever wish to know. Zach, what kind of trouble do you get into day to day here with our clients? What's your role here at Netsertive?
Yeah, so a lot of what I do is diving right into accounts, whether it be, problems or issues that we need to solve, or whether it be, coming up with strategic recommendations to drive performance, whether it be attending some of our, Google calls and other sort of platform calls to be updated on, what's going on, and really working with our account managers on, what's going on in the accounts, what are we looking for, and ultimately trying to drive success for a lot of our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I know I've definitely seen you in action, and it's paid is interesting because there are so many variables and so many people involved, especially when you're doing paid for a franchise network. And that's really what we're going to get into today because a lot of our clients are working with a variety of vendors and they want to know, is my vendor doing a good job? Is what they're saying accurate? How do I know? How can I really, investigate this relationship further and figure out if this is the right solution for me? So, what we're going to dive into here is why audit your vendors? Are their foundations sound? Are they optimizing your campaigns? Are you progressing on a roadmap in your account relationship and campaigns? And take any questions you have. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and enter them in the chat throughout the webinar, and we'll see if we're able to grab some of those during or hold them for the Q&A. A bit about Netsertive, if you're not fully familiar with this yet. Netsertive is all about helping franchise networks to take control of your brand at the local level. We have deep expertise in localized digital marketing. We do paid, organic SEO. We have web solutions for location pages. We've facilitated $2 billion in media spend through our platform over the last approximately 15 years. And we are all about building relationships with franchise networks, both at the corporate level and the franchisee level. So that really makes the difference in franchising is building trust and having those relationships that really make a difference. So why audit your vendors? You might be uh, coming up for renewal or a contract. You might be experiencing a lot of problems because in franchise marketing, what we see is that digital marketing can just be fragmented, siloed, overwhelming in general. That's what we hear from a lot of our clients and prospects when they're trying to figure out what's going on with my digital. How can I get franchisees to invest more in digital marketing? I was burned by my last vendor. How can I make this multi-channel execution less overwhelming? I don't feel like I have the data to coach franchisees on digital marketing. Zach, what do you feel like are some of the top pain points you hear from clients around this problem of scaling across multiple locations?
Yeah, I think some of the feedback that we hear most often is number one is I wasn't hitting my goals or I wasn't successful. Another one that I hear pretty often is they weren't being innovative. They weren't testing new things. We weren't trying to push the envelope. We weren't trying to do new tactics. And the third is you just didn't hear from them often. I wasn't quite sure what they were doing. It felt like a set it and forget it kind of approach, which we all know is not the right way to go. Um, but I think with all of those things, the good thing is that you're aware. You're aware that you have a program and you have a pulse to some degree of what's going on. And really, what I would like for you guys to get out of this webinar is to understand like what should I be looking at when I'm looking at my performance report, or what are some red flags with my vendors, and sort of what are some things that I should be thinking about. And I want to say, like, with the things that we'll discuss, it is not, one size fits all. There are best practices, but then there are scenarios when the best practices don't apply. And I think the big thing here, as long as you're having those conversations, and you're understanding and you're growing in the relationship and your knowledge, that's the most important thing. The more we ask why, the more that we understand what's going on, the better that relationship and that communication is, and the better that relationship and communication are, the better results that you'll have overall, from not just from a digital marketing perspective, but also from a partnership level as well.
Yeah, that's so true. It reminds me of writing, where if you're learning how to write, you have to follow all the rules of grammar. But if you're an expert writer, maybe you can leave out a comma where there's supposed to be one, or capitalize letters differently, right? So there's definitely a lot of expertise and wisdom involved to know, based on these circumstances, what is the next best strategy that we need to be doing. So we have actually compiled a paid vendor audit, and we'll be sharing this out after the webinar. And it's a detailed list of questions and why it matters. And you can actually score your vendors so that you can think, is this worth a conversation with them? Should I look for a new one? So we'll definitely be sharing that out after the webinar. So are their foundations sound, right? Are they doing the basics? And this is really all about understanding your goals and performance metrics. Zach said at the beginning, we talk to people that say, we weren't successful. We didn't hit our goals. They did not deliver on what they said they would deliver. And it's really about aligning and identifying the key performance indicators, right, of the program, and making sure that everyone involved is aligned on what that looks like. And really making sure that the vendors are being aligned with the franchise goals as well, right, at the local level. Because we see there are big goals at the corporate level. You want to see your franchises grow. But when that gets down to that hyper local marketing level, are the franchisees getting what they need to grow their particular business? Because depending on where they are geographically, even, they might have different goals with different services that they offer, or depending on how mature they are in their business, they might be running a different program. So it's all about how you can scale down to that hyper local level. But Zach, what do you think about this question? Does your vendor know what KPIs matter most to your franchise?
Yeah, I think it's a very important question. And I think, there's different levels to this. I think, at a very face level, the easy one is, you know, are you aligned on what the primary KPI is? Is it a cost per lead goal, focusing on efficiency, or is it more like a lead volume metric? I mean, and what are we considering to be a lead here? A lead could be a form submit, a lead could be a phone call, it could be a store visit, it could be even a purchase if you're an e-commerce client. So I think understanding, where the alignment is and the definitions surrounding them is the first step to be headed in the right direction. I think we could take it a step further, and I think where this is where some of the greater conversations occur is, what are your business goals? And I say that, and that may sound very, fundamental, but not always do digital marketing results determine business results as well. That's what we set out to do. But we may say, hey, I need to get 25 leads per month. And we may drive 25, leads, and maybe, 20 phone calls and 5 form submits. And you may say, hey, I had 25 leads, but only one of those turned into a customer. I really need to be generating 10 new customers a month. Well, bam, that's a whole new conversation. That's an important thing for us to be talking about. And so understanding, your business goals and then translating them into digital marketing KPIs, I think is the best way to go. So I think making sure that there's alignment, not only on their digital marketing, goals, but also on what your overall business objectives are. The other piece is, if we sort of, take it even a step further down,
Mhm.
we understand that everybody's here to generate business. But not every business is focusing on the same thing at the same point in time. And what I mean by that is, you may be a new business, and you may say, yeah, I need leads, but also awareness is super important to me right now. You may also say, retention is something that I'm struggling with, and I want to focus on that. And so obviously, we want to have it all. We want to generate new customers. We want to retain the ones that we have, and we want to drive awareness. But there has to be some sort of prioritization to those items, and making sure that your digital marketing partner is aligned on the prioritization of those objectives is another key point in making sure that there's alignment within that relationship. And then the last thing that I wanted to sort of leave you with on this topic is, in general, with most of the franchises that we work with, they don't do just, one service.
Mm.
You may
Yeah.
say, we do, flooring, and you may do flooring in garages, in basements, or in kitchens. But I'm sure that each different service you offer has a different level of profitability or revenue for your business. So also understanding the various services that you offer and which ones you deem to be the most important because they are the most profitable or drive the most revenue to your business is another important piece to this overall puzzle. Because that kind of information allows us to lean in what makes the biggest impact to your business and lean away from things that may have smaller margins or may not be as beneficial for what you're looking to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where that red flag comes in is conversions and optimizations really need to be at that franchisee location level because you need to align to their business and how they want to grow. When we look at budget allocation and performance, uh, what about this question, Zach? Of how's your vendor evaluating budget efficiency and how you can tell?
Yeah, and I think this just goes right, I'm glad that we asked the other question first because I think that this goes right into that.
Mhm.
Because I think the very first thing is, all right, so we understand our KPIs and our performance metrics and what's important. Now, is your budget allocated based on what is driving that performance? So if you say, my cost per lead is the most important, metric from a digital marketing perspective, then we shouldn't see our display campaigns with a majority of budget. We know that's more of an awareness tactic. Nor should we see more dollars spent in campaigns that are not generating leads if really low funnel is one of our primary KPIs. So one exercise that I tend to do when it's related to budget allocation and making sure that it is aligned based on our performance KPIs is I look at our campaign breakout. I say, are we focused on lead volume or cost per lead or what have you? And what I'll do is I'll sort of break out into a pie chart. And when I break that into a pie chart based on campaign, it allows me to understand, we're seeing like 33% of our results in this campaign, 10 here, 25 here, et cetera. And then based on that, I then do another breakdown of the pie chart around our ad spend against those exact same campaigns. And they don't need to be identical, but they should be directionally related. They should be very similar. Because what we don't want to see is that what's generating leads is one of the most underfunded campaigns if lead volume is the biggest and most important KPI for us as a business. Now, I will say, and I kind of alluded to this in the beginning, this isn't a one size fits all, sort of rule of thumb either. There are exceptions to the rule, such as, it's always good to have a budget for testing. That can't be layered into this conversation because that's a completely separate entity. Promotional campaigns saying, hey, we're running a promotion. We want to lean in as far as here. Well, we don't know what those performance metrics are going to look like. So we want to overfund something like that to maximize the results. And those are just a few examples, but understanding that in general, we should see our budget allocation align with our results from a directional perspective is a good place to start. And if we don't see that they are aligned, it never hurts to ask why. There may always be a justifiable reason, but understanding the why behind it makes that conversation start and allows that partnership to grow.
Yeah, that's great. And I think uh, that's part of what we'll talk about later around the account roadmap is how well that vendor is managing your expectations proactively, right? And if you're understanding if we're doing something that seems counterintuitive right now, you should really understand why and how that's going to evolve over the next few months. Um, so, are they optimizing your campaigns? This is a big one around. We hear a lot of the set it and forget it, and there are so many campaign optimization strategies, especially with the approach of having hyper local marketing, where you have a lot of ad units and campaigns that are localized at that level. On the left-hand side, this is a case study from a Netsertive client where we had 200 active locations, 1,400 active ad units, 285 localized campaigns. And of that, we had 3,500 monthly campaign changes. So our system will make automatic changes, we'll make manual changes. There's a lot of updates that are going on to optimize campaigns. And even looking at ad unit extensions, there's 5,400, and the ad changes just to the ads, there's 1,800. So I think if it's really looking at how often campaigns are updated is going to tell you how optimized they are and where that, or that's one way, one lens of seeing optimization. So Zach, how do you think about that question of are you aware how often your campaigns are being optimized? Is it enough? Because that is it enough is really the key question. Because it could be that you're hitting your goals, everything's perfect, it's it, right? So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to campaign changes, I think it's a big balancing act. Um, but before we sort of dive into that, I want to make sure everybody understands, how can you find out how many changes are happening in your
Yeah,
account?
that's a good one.
Because that's something that I think, talking about this without understanding, where can I find this could be a difficult thing. Within every platform, whether it be Google, Meta, Microsoft, there is a change history within your account. And you can even break things down on a campaign level, an ad group level to sort of look at the change history. Um, and there's a lot of different documentation that shows where you can find it, but there is a change history within each individual platform to see those things. But getting back to your original question, Jason, yeah, it's a red flag if there are no changes in your account, especially over an extended period. But the inverse is also true. And what I mean by that is if there are too many large changes within a short time period, that can also be detrimental as well. Especially as we're talking about, on a single account. If we're seeing like that there are bid strategy changes every single day, we're not really giving the platforms themselves to learn. We rely on AI and the algorithms within these platforms to perform, and the algorithms operate based off of patterns and behaviors. And a single day of pattern and behavior isn't statistically significant enough to understand, where are the biggest opportunities, where are the ebbs and flows, and where are the greater pockets of success. And so sort of balancing between, doing minimal changes and doing way too many changes is really a needle that we tend to thread the majority of the time. And just so you understand like the reason why too many changes can be detrimental outside of like the inherent algorithm shakeup is if we're testing and we're learning new things and we're throwing a bunch of different changes in at one time, it's very difficult to understand what made that impact, whether it be positive or negative. So making sure that we're being strategic with our platform changes, our tests, making sure that we're not testing too many things at one time and that we're giving it the period of evaluation is very important. It's also good to know because we know that even within some of these platforms, there's an attribution component to it as well. And when I say attribution, what I mean by that is a click that could occur today may not technically convert for 3 or 4 more days past. And we want to make sure that we give the ability when we look and reflect back on performance to give that credit of that click that occurred today because it was imperative in driving that success that happened 4 days later. And then the last thing is obviously change volume is a part of this topic, but also the type of change I think is also important to note. And what I mean by that is we also don't want to be too aggressive with our changes. I've kind of talked about the algorithm and some of the AI and it needing data to ramp up and to understand. If we're leveraging a bid strategy of target CPA, which is a cost per conversion bid strategy, it's looking to achieve a cost per conversion that you set out. If you change it from $100, and that's what you've been hitting in the past 30 days, to 10, wow, that's a big shakeup. it does not have the data to understand what a cost per conversion of $10 looks like. And it can completely throw a wrench in your campaigns. So in those scenarios, what we typically recommend is more of a phased approach, going from 100 to 75 to 50 to 25, and then maybe to 10. And evaluating the impact of each one of those sort of phase changes. Because with each step, you're saying, hey, you haven't seen what it's like under 75, but you're kind of close to what it was like under 100. I'm sure there were some patterns that you're able to identify that could get us closer to there. So understanding, that the type of change and not being too aggressive is just as important as the number of changes as well.
Yeah,
But
that's
I'll sort
awesome.
of stop there. And it is very important because a set and forget it approach is going to be very detrimental to your overall business objectives.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's for those of us that do this kind of marketing, I think that's part of the fun is knowing, what are the optimizations and the timelines and how you layer everything in the right order so that you can really get the most from a budget as far as performance goes. But yeah, it's great point, Zach. And kind of more along the same lines around best practices with smart bidding. There are so many acronyms and bidding strategies you hear about, and vendors might be talking about the advantages of one or another. And ultimately, there are a lot of benefits to smart bidding. So, how do you talk to clients about this as far as this question around bidding strategies that are currently being used and what makes sense with goals and best practices?
Yeah, I think, out of all of the topics that we've kind of touched on thus far, this is probably one of the more convoluted ones, just because there's so many different scenarios and so many different applications and use cases of what you should be doing in each scenario. So I'll sort of kick things off with Jason saying that just ask why. I think that's the most important thing with this topic is to understand why you're leveraging a certain bid strategy with this campaign and what is the goal. I think that helps with the education piece, but it also opens up the overall conversation and understanding of the strategy. Now, that being said, sort of diving into, how I approach it and some of the things that we look for at Netsertive is tying back to your KPIs and what you're looking to do and aligning that with your campaign optimizations. They have to go hand in hand. So what I mean by that is if your goal is awareness, and you're utilizing maximize conversions, we're limiting the awareness of that campaign. We're not saying go after eyeballs. We're saying, look, let's go after people who are going to fill out a form. That's not what we're trying to accomplish there. Also, if your goal is like an e-commerce and trying to drive revenue, and we're leveraging a target cost per acquisition or cost per conversion, well, we're not factoring in, average order value or what the different price point is per product. So we should be leveraging something like a maximize conversion value or a T-ROAS strategy. And if you're also saying, no, like I'm a service-based customer, I want to focus on phone calls and form submits, and we're doing maximize clicks, well, we're not optimizing against a goal here. We're just trying to drive traffic to your website and hope that it converts. Now, there are nuances to this. It isn't, again, a one size fits all statement. We leverage maximize clicks on sometimes when it's a lead based strategy. And the reason for that is you have to have, as a best practice, 15 conversions within the last 30 days for the algorithm to identify where the opportunity is to drive those conversions. And if we're not there yet, we leverage maximize clicks to make sure we're maximizing the traffic to your website to give us the biggest opportunity to drive those conversions to then move over. So it's also understanding like where are we at that point in migrating to like a smart bidding strategy. There may also be like systemic reasoning as to why a certain bid strategy is used. We like, for example, within conquesting campaigns, because they don't convert necessarily as well as others. We tend to see them funded a little bit less than some of our other campaigns, but because of a lot of things that go into what costs for a click, they tend to be a bit of a higher cost per click. So we tend to see scenarios where your budget is lower than your average CPC. And in that scenario, if we're seeing a click here and a click there within any given day, being on anything other than manual CPC can cause a problem, because we're relying on an algorithm under maximize clicks and maximize conversions, but we're not getting enough data for a pattern. So we can be inhibiting the campaign from performing. So in that case, we take a step back and we'll sort of set the bids at a manual level to make sure that we're relying on where we're showing up in the search results, but not necessarily on an algorithm. So there's a lot of different things that go into it, but I would say if something looks off to you, just ask why. Sometimes justification can be provided. Sometimes it's like, oh no, that's a good call out. Let me look into that. And I think again, the conversation breeds, depth to the relationship.
Yeah, definitely. And it also will show how much digital marketing knowledge that your point of contact has, right? Which is another important factor in how that relationship will go. So looking at multi-channel strategy, so having a multi-funnel marketing strategy. Sometimes one channel is enough. Sometimes it's really important to have multiple channels running. How do you think about this, Zach?
Well, I think it's very important. Um, I think that it is something that is a difficult thing to talk about and to understand the true impact. But I do think that for a long-term business, this is something that has to be at least discussed in a roadmap to get to this point. And so what I mean by that is when I talk about a multi-funnel marketing strategy, I define that as you have your high funnel, which by that I'm talking about awareness tactics, then mid funnel, which is more of like a re-engagement component, and then low funnel, which is that lead capture piece. Um, Without having a high or mid funnel, the our lower funnel tactics are inevitably going to dry out. They're going to become less efficient. They're going to be more cost prohibitive. Um, but with some of these high funnel tactics and these mid funnel tactics, we engage in some of these like display oriented campaigns with low CPCs that drive that brand awareness. And then we do things like a retargeting campaign to drive that re-engagement. That when we get to a search campaign that is somebody looking to make a decision, those CPCs are less. We see our conversion rates are better because they're already aware of us. And so some examples of like some high funnel tactics could be a display campaign. It could be like a programmatic display campaign. A YouTube campaign is another example. Mid funnel tactics could be a retargeting campaign. It could even be a search campaign in the terms of going after more categorical search terms. And then like low funnel tactics would be like a branded, very high intent search keywords and things like that. But I think, one of the biggest barriers that we see in trying to implement a multi-funnel marketing strategy is budget. It isn't cheap. It is not something that you can do with minimal budget. So a lot of the times, in talking with clients, when I run into the situation, I say, okay, understood, here's what we're going to do. We're going to drive short-term success so we can implement a long-term strategy. And so what I mean by that is we do lean in on low funnel tactics, and we do drive success. But with the understanding that once we've gotten things to where they need to be, we're going to reinvest back into our business from a high funnel tactics perspective, and then really start to build out this entire multi-funnels marketing strategy. Um, it is important, and it does impact your business on many different levels. Again, like from a brand awareness perspective, on the re-engagement, it helps with conversion rates and lead generation and overall just revenue for your business as well. So I would say at the very least, it's not necessarily a red flag if an agency isn't running a multi-funnel marketing strategy, but it is a red flag if they haven't talked to you about one. And I think that's the most important takeaway with this question.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think related to that, um, thinking about account lifecycle and relationship management, how often do you hear from your vendor? Can you talk a little bit about an account, Zach, and how, when you're working with a new vendor or setting up a new account, there's that progression of how an account ramps up. I think that'd be interesting in addition to this question of how often you hear from your vendor.
Yeah, I think that this is another one of those scenarios that it's not a one size fits all.
Mhm.
Um, And I think that that's fine. I think not every business is the same either. I think every person that we interact with in these conversations is also not the same. Um, some are more, hey, we need to drive results now. This is a make or break time. And I think, your vendor should be aware of that and their communication should reflect that. And to your point, Jason, like there is a life cycle to these things. Especially early on. One of the things that I like to focus on in the early stages is a bit of over communication. Um, I believe that there is a bit of anxiety, a bit of nerves in a new relationship, and understanding what is going on behind the scenes. I think provides a lot of relief from the consumer perspective. I can only imagine if I had spent X number of dollars to drive digital marketing results. They said, "Hey, we launched," and I didn't hear anything for 30 days. I would be super nervous, especially if I wasn't seeing the results that I wanted to see day one. Which is also like that happens sometimes. There is a ramp up to campaign performance, but I think your agency sort of calming those nerves and explaining what's going on. Hey, we're adding in negative keywords. We're in the 7-day learning period. We've just deployed this campaign type. Now we're about to do this. I think shows that there's movement going on. And I think that there's an understanding of how you're feeling and what you're looking to do there. Now, it is important to make sure that you do have those, relatively frequent touch points outside of just email. I do think engaging with somebody either over the phone or via chat is important. Now, we do understand that a lot of the people that we engage with um, have other duties outside of digital marketing. A lot of times they're running a business. And so we understand that maybe you can't make a phone call, every month. But I think the red flag here is your agency at least trying to have one though? It is up to you whether that should happen or not. But as long as the agency keeps reaching out and trying to engage in that way, I think shows that it's not a set up forget it, that they are trying new things and that things are happening behind the scenes. Um, but I would also like the frequency of the touch points aren't always the most important thing either. It's also the content. Um, it's not we don't look at these sort of conversations as a reporting of the facts. Um, that is part of what we do. But also it is, what are we recommending that we should do to drive more results, or where should we pivot from here, or what should we be testing? The other thing that we like to talk about is what's going on in the landscape. What are we kind of seeing coming down the pipeline? I know last year some of the big topics that we had is the GA4 migration. So hey, this is coming. It's more event based. Here's some of the things that we're working on to get you ready for that in preparation for that migration. Um, you know, we also hear, some of the changes within like Meta and changing some of the goals that you could switch on a campaign. And here's what we'll be doing on our end as a result of that. I think as long as your agency partner is talking about the reporting, the strategic initiatives that have been completed, the recommended upcoming strategic initiatives to continue to build on the performance, and then what's going on in the landscape and how are they positioning you for success and future proofing your strategic initiatives, then I think as long as you're checking those 4 boxes, then you're doing the right thing. Um, where I do get concerned is it's a, hey, here's the performance. Do you have anything? No. Do I have anything? No. Okay, I'll give you some time back in your day. Those aren't very fruitful conversations. There's not a ton of content or sustenance from that. And your job is to run a business, and we're here to be your digital marketing partner, which means we should be helping and providing those recommendations. And that's why you hire us. So we want to make sure that we're holding up our end of the bargain when it comes to those things. And if your agency partner is not, and they're just sort of checking that one box, reporting and then checking the phone call and then moving on, then that's not really a beneficial relationship from both sides. You're not maximizing the time that's being spent on the account, the dollars, and even just the time on the phone call. So if you're finding out that they're not reaching out to you for those phone calls and they don't have that sustenance, that would be a red flag for me.
That's awesome, Zach. Really good stuff. Well, definitely open to Q&A here. I know we had a couple questions that were submitted, so we can get into those here briefly. And like I said, we'll be sharing this paid vendor audit out on the back end. And as far as questions, if anyone has any, feel free to enter it in the box. But I know wanted to ask, how do you know it's time to test a new experimental channel? I know there's all kinds of new channels, new things popping up. Kind of the shiny penny syndrome, I think, is the context of this question. So when is that the right thing to do versus keep optimizing the fundamentals?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say we want to make sure, I kind of use a race car analogy. We want to make sure that we've got all of our tires tight and all the bolts and everything good to go before we go 100 miles an hour.
Hmm.
And so I would say you want to make sure that you have your fundamental results down, that you're hitting or are close to your primary KPIs. And then, I think that it's worth exploring other channels. On the other side, if you keep trying and you're not hitting those goals and you're beating your head against a wall, it's not driving results, then I would say pivot faster than waiting. So in that scenario, it's either like we're not getting anything, we need to do something new now, as scenario one, or hey, we're really ramping up, we're really getting to somewhere, but we're kind of seeing this point of sort of diminishing return. We're kind of getting to this sort of like sewing off on the exponential line graph. And now it's time to loop something in to test something to see if we can sort of raise that ceiling. But I would also lean on your digital marketing partner to kind of get their recommendation as well. There are scenarios where we see new campaign types rolled out from Google that are just completely new. And it is something that we hear that it will drive results. And it is something that sometimes we want to take advantage of now. Especially something like demand gen and how it operates and performance max. Those were things that we were hearing were driving instant success. And in those cases, we wanted to make sure that we were capitalizing on that as soon as possible. And in those cases, we actually moved a lot quicker than we would have some of the other tests.
Nice. That's awesome. All right. Well, it looks like we have no other questions at this point. So just wanted to say thank you so much to all our attendees. Thank you to you, Zach, for your expertise and sharing all of this incredible insight that you have. If anyone has any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me directly at jlynch@netsertive.com. And I look forward to following up and sharing that paid vendor audit with you all via email. So that is it for our webinar today. And yeah, thank you all so much.
Thanks, everybody.